So here we will examine some disorders of bone tissue. Disorders of bones usually result from imbalances in deposit of bone tissue or reabsorption or removal of bone tissue. Here we'll focus on two disorders, osteomalacia or rickets, and the second is osteoporosis. So osteomalacia goes by two different names depending on, or two different designations depending on who's affected by it. It's called osteomalacia in adults. It's called rickets in children. Even though they have two different names, they are both referring to the same condition. So with osteomalacia or rickets, we see that bones are too soft to support body weight. And this occurs when too little calcium is deposited into the extracellular matrix of bone tissue, usually from a diet that is low in calcium, or if the person has a vitamin D deficiency. So recall that vitamin D is important in helping the intestines absorb calcium from our diet. So if vitamin D is low, then that means that very little calcium can be absorbed from the food that we've ingested. The condition is a lot more apparent in children than it is in adults because the developing bones, particularly the weight-bearing bones, like the bones of the lower limbs, as well as the bones of the pelvis, will tend to bend under body weight. And when these bones stop growing longer, that is, once the person reaches the end of adolescence and into early adulthood, the bones will remain permanently bent. So the second condition we'll focus on is osteoporosis. And osteoporosis is a condition in which the reabsorption of bone tissue occurs at a faster rate than the deposit of bone tissue into the skeleton. And when we say reabsorption, we're meaning that the bone is being broken down so that its calcium can be released into the bloodstream. And because the removal of bone tissue in this condition outpaces the deposit of bone tissue, the skeleton will slowly begin to lose bone mass over time. So osteoporosis occurs more commonly in women because women tend to have a lower overall bone mass and bone density than men do. And they also experience a drop in estrogens, in particular during menopause, that becomes one potential risk factor for osteoporosis or for contracting osteoporosis. The reason for that is that estrogen slows the activity of a cell called the osteoclast. And the osteoclasts are the bone cells that are responsible for breaking down bony tissue in order to release calcium into the bloodstream. So once estrogen levels drop during events such as menopause, the activity of those osteoclasts can then accelerate, which accelerates the breakdown of bone tissue. So other risk factors include a reduction in weight-bearing exercises or being bedridden, so as we saw with Wolff's Law. Another risk factor is low calcium levels in the bloodstream, so in particular if a person's diet has been low in calcium for a very long period of time, or if they have a vitamin D deficiency. Smoking is also a risk factor because it reduces estrogen levels and also reduces the ability for our bodies to absorb calcium from the foods that we consume.